My daughter pocketed $37 million, and then she threw me out. I'm Margaret Collins, 65, and I stood on the slate driveway as the iron gate slid shut like a verdict, my suitcase thumping against my shin. Ashley's face was smooth as glass behind those oversized sunglasses, her citrus perfume mixing with new paint fumes from the Atherton mansion she'd bought overnight. A security guard in a navy jacket hovered, eyes averted, while my Whole Foods bag with my pills and reading glasses sagged in his hand. The Tesla idled. The California sun burned through the eucalyptus haze, and my own daughter couldn't meet my eyes when she said, "This isn't your home anymore, Mom." 4 days later, at 2:14 a.m., my cracked iPhone buzzed on the motel nightstand off El Camino Real, and her voice came through shredded with panic. "Mom, please, please, pick up, I need you," she sobbed, breath hitching, a siren keening somewhere behind her words, and the echo of heels on marble. I sat bolt upright in that room that smelled like bleach and stale coffee, the AC rattling, heart pounding so hard I tasted copper. Ashley, who couldn't say my name on Monday without a lawyer present, was begging me on Friday like she was 6 again, and the storm had knocked the lights out. "I messed up," she whispered. "They're at the gate, and I don't know what to do." If you're wondering how a PTA mom from San Mateo ended up on a curb while her newly minted millionaire daughter cashed wires and burned bridges, I'll tell you every step. How money slid between us like black ice, how the papers were signed, who smiled in our faces and twisted the knife when the cameras left. I'll show you the receipts, the dinner where everything cracked, and the one mistake I made that let it happen. Because what happened next, in that driveway at 2:17 a.m., changed everything. Again. If you believe money tests blood more than it changes it, hit subscribe to follow the rest of this story. When the call ended, the motel room felt smaller, as if the ceiling had lowered and the walls had inched inward between the squeal of the AC and the sigh of passing cars out on El Camino. My fingers were trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone trying to get to my shoes. My suitcase sat open on the carpet where I'd left it, shirts and underwear folded in the way my mother taught me, sleeves tucked in like hands at rest, because order is something you can control when the rest of life is a wind tunnel. I grabbed my keys, my Whole Foods bag with its amber bottles of pills rattling like wind chimes, and the old denim jacket that still smelled faintly of rosemary from the bush I'd planted by the back stoop in San Mateo. I'm Margaret Collins, 65 years old, PTA president twice, Girl Scout cookie mom, the kind of person who always knows which neighbor has a post hole digger you can borrow, or how to get permanent marker out of a white blouse. Ashley used to joke that if the world ended, I could start it again with a hot glue gun and a Costco rotisserie chicken. She said it like a compliment, the way daughters do when they still think you're the sturdy tree they can climb and jump from without ever hitting ground. And then she stopped. Those words became something like an antique, once admired, rarely touched. I shoved my arms into the jacket and caught my reflection in the dark TV screen. The face looking back at me was softer than it felt on the inside. A softness earned from years of squinting into mornings, kneading little headaches out of a little girl's temples, standing in high school auditoriums under harsh lights, clapping until my palms stung. If you'd asked me last year, I would have told you my life was small and proud, a string of ordinary pearls threaded by habit and love. Now it felt like I was holding beads in my hands with no string, and the floor was sloped. The Corolla coughed awake in the parking lot and settled into that familiar low hum that has carried me to every work shift and every ballet recital. I pulled out onto El Camino, the neon vacancy signs blinking past like old eyes. Safeway's red letters, a steady guardian even at 2 a.m. The eucalyptus along the road pressed their smell through the cracked window. And somewhere in the distance, a Caltrain horn sounded, a sound so woven into life here that it sometimes feels like a heartbeat. Years ago, I taught Ashley to drive under this same eucalyptus haze. She was 15, knuckles white on the wheel, cheeks flushed. I remember her looking at me when a siren pierced the air, her eyes asking which way to pull. "Right," I said. "We always make room." It's what my mother told me. It's what I've tried to do all my life. Make room. For other cars. For other people. For the storms that swell and pass. Atherton at night is a different kind of dark. Not the shy, modest darkness of a neighborhood with porch lights and someone's TV glow seen through curtains, but the curated shade of houses that are less homes than bunkers wrapped in glass. The gate to the mansion stood where it had 4 days earlier, sleek and silent, the iron bars like fingers around the soft throat of a dream. I slowed, turned down the radio where the Giants postgame show murmured like a bedtime story, and my own breath sounded too loud in the car. The security guard on duty couldn't hide the wince when he recognized me. He had a face that would have looked just as at home holding a baby as it did holding that clipboard. "She called me," I said before he could. "Ashley called me." He shifted his weight, eyes flicking to the intercom, to the camera, back to me. I saw the other car lights then, idling beyond the hedge, 2 black SUVs and something that looked like a police cruiser through the slats of the gate. All that polished, expensive quiet broken by the occasional crackle of a radio and the soft murmur of someone on the phone. She said, "They're at the gate," I told him, and it felt like reciting a prayer by heart, words that mean more than they say. He pressed the call button, his thumb hovering a second like he was deciding which heart to protect. The speaker crackled. "Yes." Ashley sounded breathless, a whisper stretched thin. It pulled me through time so violently that for half a second I saw a small Ashley clutching a stuffed bear, standing at the top of the stairs the night the earthquake rattled our glasses and set the chandelier swaying. She didn't cry then, just stood holding perfectly still, eyes fixed on me as if the sight of me would keep the house from falling. "It's your mother," the guard said into the speaker, and I could feel the correction in Ashley's mind from mom to your mother. All the ways language can build a fence or open a door. "Let her in," she said. Sharp, immediate, and then softer, like the air leaking out of a balloon. "Please." The gate slid back with that same measured grace that had locked me out 4 days earlier, the metal on track like a judge's gavel with better manners. I drove up the curved driveway slowly, tires whispering over slate. The mansion rose like a ship out of fog, all white angles and glass. Its own little planet, as foreign to me as the surface of the moon. Heels on marble. That was the sound I had heard through the phone, and it was the sound that met me when the front door opened. The foyer made everything echo. Footsteps. Voices. The breath you didn't know you were holding. Ashley stood in the middle of it like a figure in a painting, her silk robe tied in a knot too tight, the belt biting into her waist, her hair not yet ironed into the glossy sheet she wore like armor now. The citrus perfume that had made me think of summer when she was little, and we'd slice oranges at the kitchen table now mixed with the throat-catching tang of new paint, and something else. Fear's copper edge. For a moment, everything was still. The men beyond the hedges might as well have been deer on a hillside. "You came," she said, and her voice cracked in the middle, catching on that small stone of surprise, as if there had been a version of this night where I didn't. "I always do," I said, before I could stop myself. She stepped toward me and then stopped, as if she had hit a line on the floor I couldn't see. When Ashley is frightened, she arranges things. When she was 6, it was stuffed animals lined up for a tea party no one drank. In middle school, it was colored pencils organized by shade, a little rainbow she could put in her backpack. Now it was thoughts, people, narratives. You could see her working on me like she would on a deck for an investor. Which version of me did she need? "Mom," she said, and the word sounded both too young and too late. "I messed up." Her eyes slid to the door. "They say they have paperwork. They say—" She stopped, shook her head like the words were grains of rice stuck to her tongue. "I need you to take me out the back. Just for tonight. I need to get to LA. Or Tahoe." She said it the way other people say church or doctor, as if the place itself could cure you. "Who are they?" I asked. The front door thudded gently, like someone testing its strength without wanting to be rude. Through the glass I could make out shapes, the brim of a baseball cap, the reflective stripe on a uniform. Ashley's mouth made the shape of a word before sound came. Reporters, and someone with papers, and Sam. She swallowed. Sam Brogan. I knew that name. Everyone in Menlo Park knows that name whether we want to or not. Venture capital, Patagonia vest, a smile that shows all the teeth but never warms the eyes. He had been at the dinner where this glass castle was conjured. He had toasted Ashley with a champagne bottle big enough to bathe in, had called her a force, and tipped his chair back like gravity didn't apply. "He's here?" I said. He brought people. Her fingers were already digging through her phone, swiping and tapping in little stabs. Messages lit the screen. "Where are the servers positioned? And do not speak to anyone in drafting a statement." The portrait mode, whatever setting that softened her features, was gone. It didn't know what to do with this version of her, and maybe neither did I. I could smell coffee somewhere, the kind that comes out of a Chrome machine with its own app, bitter and expensive. It made me think of all the nights Ashley had worked at our kitchen table with a Chemex and a bag of beans from that little place in Burlingame, her feet tucked up under her, my robe around her shoulders. "1 more hour," she'd say, and I would sit with her and cut out laminated stars for the kindergarten board, tissue paper flowers bleeding bright color into my fingertips. "You're not sleeping either," she'd say, teasing and grateful, and we would smile at each other over the glow of screens, both of us pretending we weren't scared. "What did you do?" I asked, "because you can't put out a fire if you don't know what's burning." "They're saying misrepresentation." She whispered it like a curse or a foreign word she was afraid of pronouncing wrong. "They're saying numbers. They're saying user growth, attribution. They don't even understand." She took a breath that sounded like a hiccup. I didn't lie. I just rounded. Everyone does it. Sam said, her eyes flicked to the floor. He said I had to play the game to stay in the game. I thought of the evening at that Atherton table, a different house, the same marble and glass, men in their uniform of confidence, wrists heavy watches, teeth bright as they bit into lamb chops. Ashley had worn a dress that looked like poured metal. She had introduced me as my mentor because it photographed better than my mother. My job had been to smile and make sure the servers kept the wine and the plates and the conversation moving. "Optics," she had said, patting my shoulder as if she were straightening a napkin. "No beige, Mom, okay? It washes you out. And be careful with the red, please." She had winked, a shrill, small thing, and I had nodded and agreed, because I wanted her to feel proud when she looked at me the way I felt proud when I looked at her. I had signed things at that house. I remember the feel of the pen in my hand, the slight give of the parchment grade paper, the way the words blurred a little because I hadn't brought my glasses. "It's just housekeeping, Mom," Ashley had said, her breath warm with champagne, her fingers on my elbow moving me to where the man in the blue suit and the easy laugh waited with the stack. "Everyone's doing it." They had told me I was an early advisor, gave me a little lapel pin that said Founder's Circle, and promised me a plaque on a wall I never saw. They had told me that additional documents would be sent over email to Streamline. I had clicked and clicked like a bird pecking at seeds. The mistake I made was an old-fashioned kind of mistake, the kind you make with love like a horse pulling a wagon too heavy. I believed that the things I did in private for my daughter were the same as the things I should sign in public for her, and that the world would recognize the difference. When the acquisition happened, and news outlets came and took pictures of Ashley on a white sofa with her legs long and crossed and her smile practicing a new grammar, I assumed that my name on early forms meant something would trickle down to the woman who had kept the lights on. But when the papers came that week, the ones that needed my signature to smooth the transfer, there was a clause, a line about waiving something that sounded like a gift. I asked Ashley what it meant. "It means we're almost done," she had said. "It means you're not liable." Her assistant had printed the pages and lined them up with paper clips like a runway. "Trust me," my daughter had said, and I had. "They want a statement," Ashley said now, and a tear made a clean line through whatever expensive product glossed her cheeks. She was shaking hands with panic and trying to remember which one of them squeezed harder. "I need you to tell them you handled the household expenses, that any transfers in the early days were you, that it was my mom being a mom, that no one told me." She blinked fast and swallowed. "It will be fine. You didn't do anything. You're a person." I'm a headline. I felt my body do something I recognized from Linda Peterson's house years ago when her son was being accused of stealing at the Walgreens. We were standing in the principal's office at Abbott Middle School, and Linda's face was pale as chalk. I remember stepping between her and the assistant principal without even deciding to, standing up straight without straightening first, feeling as if there were a ribbon pulled taut from my spine to the ceiling. "We're going to sit down," I had said then. "We're going to speak slowly, and we're going to listen. We're going to sit down," I said now. "We're going to speak slowly." The clicking of the cameras outside had started, a nervous kind of early morning insect noise. The doorbell chimed politely, as if to remind us it existed. Ashley stared at me. She has my eyes but not my lids. You could always see more iris in hers, more ocean. "Mom," she said, putting her palms together like prayer. "Please, just tonight, please." The kitchen in the mansion looked like a magazine pretending kitchens are currently in fashion. White surfaces, a bowl of oranges that looked choreographed. The coffee was on a timer. It burbled. The machine spitting little sighs, like it was tired, too. Rosa stood by the island, hands folded, shoulders in a line that made me think of church. We had spoken once when I brought Ashley a pot of chicken soup early on, and I learned that Rosa's niece plays soccer in Daly City. "Señora," she said now, an apology in the tilt of her head that went past words and into the old language women use when they don't want to say disrespectful things about other women's children. "It's all right," I whispered, touching her hand, and the simple human warmth of it steadied something in me the way the old banister used to steady me on the stairs in my San Mateo house. The house Ashley had papered my memories over with. White noise in a white house. On the marble were 3 phones, 2 that looked like tiny spaceships and 1 that was cracked at the corner. Each buzzed in a different rhythm, a little symphony of urgency. The TV over the stove showed a loop of a news anchor, saying words at a speed that made you think you had already missed them. "Sources close to the matter," she kept saying, her teeth moving cleanly. "It was never supposed to be like this," Ashley said. She pulled at the silk belt until the knot was a flower, then stripped the robe and threw it over a chair, standing in running shorts and a tank top that looked like it had come free with a yoga retreat. When she straightened, she looked 10 again, long limbs and an expression like she had just realized the science fair is tomorrow, and she forgot to grow the crystals. "Do you remember the day you found that desk on the curb?" I said. The doorbell chimed again, more insistently, the polite cousin of a knock. It was on Poplar and El Camino. Someone had put a sign on it, free. The veneer was peeling and 1 leg wobbled. "You asked if we could take it because you wanted a place to do homework where you could put your feet on the drawer handles. We brought it home, and you sanded it with your grandfather's old blocks while I made dinner. You painted it that bright lily pad green. Do you remember?" I could see the desk under her window with the afternoon light touching it, crayon cups lined up, the small chipped frog we had put on top, the smell of lemon oil. "I remember," she said, and something in her face softened, a thin ice melting and showing the river below. "You saved all my drawings," she added in the flat voice of someone testing whether a thing is still true. "They're in my garage," I said, "under the Christmas stuff. But the desk didn't come into the house until we tightened the wobble. You turned it over and watched while I wedged a matchbook under the short leg so the whole thing wouldn't teeter. We did that together, and then it wasn't pretty yet, but it stood. I don't have time for this, she said, and the words had the edge of a knife used to cut cake and steak alike. I shouldn't be here. Sam said to get on a plane. Or not. He says a lot of things and he's outside. He told me I'd be the face of this for a year, and then... Her voice did something dangerous. She closed her mouth around it. I regarded her the way I used to look at cookies through the oven door, trying to see if the center had set. I will tell the truth, I said. I will always tell the truth. Her eyes flashed. That's not helpful, she snapped, the contempt coming out smooth and practiced like a long sentence in a language she'd mastered filming herself in hotels. You love to ground everything, to bring it back to middle-class common sense. She made a gesture with her hand that took in my sensible shoes, my bag with its coupons folded neatly in an envelope, the roots of me. I felt the tiny sting of it, not because it was a surprise, but because it was so polished. The way she had spoken to me 4 days before, so careful not to look me too full in the face, was refined cruelty. This was flung in panic. Both were fear wearing different lipstick. The doorbell stopped. A fist hit the door, hard, but not yet unkind. A voice called, muffled. "Ms. Bennett?" That was Ashley's last name now. She had kept the Bennett after the marriage that lasted a year, and folded like laundry. "We have documents for you." "How did they—" she started, and I saw the thoughts path through her from the spark to the smoke. Someone talking, someone selling, the little leaks you live with when you live high in a place built to resist weather. I took out my phone. I scrolled to a contact I hadn't used since the Christmas party at the firehouse when I brought lasagna, and he'd hugged me while telling me he missed my potato salad. Frank had been a lieutenant in Redwood City before he retired and took to building Adirondack chairs in his garage. He knows men like the ones outside, and he knows women like me, and he knows what it looks like when those worlds bump shoulders. "Margaret," he answered, voice thick with sleep and kindness. I told him. Not all of it, because there wasn't time, and because some of the things are just raw meat you don't throw to a dog you like. He said he would make some calls. "No one can make you open the door unless they have an order," he said. "And then it's better if you open it, on your terms." I ended the call and looked at Ashley. "You are not a rabbit," I said. "This is not a field." Her knuckles had gone white in the way girls' knuckles go white around the strap of a purse they've spent too much on. "I can't," she said. And then she did the thing she did as a child on the first day of school every year, looking at me like she could see the road backward and forward. It made my heart do an old trick. I wanted to step forward and put my palm on the side of her face like I used to, thumb under the soft skin of her eye, whisper the spells that had always worked. "You are fine. I am here. Nothing will get you that you cannot bear." I thought of the nights I had taped her feet for competitions, the tape smooth and tight, the skin clean and ready. I thought of the last check I wrote the month before she got her Series A when she said they couldn't make payroll, and she sobbed, big round tears falling into the cup of her hands, telling me she would pay me back, that she would put my name on the wall at Stanford where the donors go. I thought of the Costco cashier who saved the star stickers for me, and how those stickers were on the envelopes that went back and forth to Ashley's school, when I couldn't write a check for a field trip, but could send a note. I thought of the time we ate cereal for dinner for a week, because the minivan needed new tires, and I told Ashley we were doing it to be fun, to be quirky, to be adventurous, and then stayed up late counting pennies while she slept. "Mom," she said again, and this time it was the quiet middle of the word that held me, the little house of it. "I need you. I know I don't deserve it, but I do." The bigger conflict wasn't outside. It was here, in the air between us, in the choice I had to make, which was less between telling the truth and telling a good story, and more between who I had been for 65 years and who I was willing to be now. There is a point when a mother stops being the earth your child digs her feet into and starts being a person standing beside another person, both of you under the same moon. I walked to the door. I could feel Ashley's breath hitch, the half step she took as if she were going to catch my sleeve and then didn't. The marble was cool through the soles of my shoes. Beyond the glass, a man in a blazer held up an envelope like a trophy, his other hand gesturing for someone to move to the side. The cruiser lights weren't flashing. They weren't that kind of lights, but they were there, waiting. I put my hand on the handle, and for half a second my mind went somewhere else entirely. To a different door with a brass knob that stuck in winter, to my San Mateo house with the avocado tree dropping fruit into the neighbor's yard, to the afternoon Ashley came home early from college and laid her head on my kitchen table and said, "I'm going to drop out." And I had cut a plum into quarters and said, "Tell me why." Her hair was in a scrunchie then, her elbows dry where they rested on the formica. We ate the plum and made a list of pros and cons, and I told her that my job wasn't to keep her in a place she had outgrown, but to keep her safe while she climbed. I stood at the bottom of every ladder she put up, my hands ready. I opened the door. The night blew in with the smell of sprinklers from the lawn next door and the faint tar scent of the street. Cameras clicked. The man in the blazer's smile was professional. It included pity, like a garnish. "Ms. Bennett?" He said to me first because women like me have a way of looking like someone in charge of the house, the kind of someone who can tell him where to go. "I'm Margaret Collins," I said. "Ashley's mother." He recovered quickly and adjusted his strategy in a way that said he's done this in foyers from here to Greenwich. "We have documents for Ms. Bennett." He nodded past me toward the echoing white interior, as if my body weren't a thing that could be a gate. "Then you can leave them," I said, holding out my hand. I could feel Ashley behind me, her presence like a hummingbird's hovering. "We will review and respond through counsel." "And Ms. Bennett?" A different voice now, thin, thread-like. A reporter younger than Ashley holding her phone out as if it were a newborn. "Do you have a comment? Are the allegations accurate? How do you respond to claims your user figures were inflated to secure a higher valuation?" "Good morning," I said, because that is a thing you're allowed to say even when it feels like a lie. "It's very early. There will be a statement later today." I turned the envelope in my hand and saw the firm's letterhead. I thought of letters I used to get from Santa, the swoop of the S I made for Ashley when she was little, the looping fantasies we build and fold and give to each other hoping to be believed. Sam stood a few feet back, hands in his pockets, mouth in that soft, almost mocking line. He gave me a small nod. We had met twice, and both times he had spoken to me as if I were Ashley's nanny, not because he thought I was, but because it let him place us both in a story he understood. His hair was perfect. His eyes flicked over my shoulder like he was confirming that the furniture he had bought was still there. "Sam," I said, and my voice was steady enough to surprise even me. "Margaret," he replied, rolling the R just enough to sound like a person who spends holidays in the south of France. "I'm not a rabbit," I said again, not to him, but he heard me. He actually laughed, a little, a sound that fell in the space between us like a coin. I felt Ashley's hand flutter at my back then, like a bird that had forgotten how to land. She stepped up alongside me, and the cameras clicked like rain on tin. She squared her shoulders the way I used to tell her when she had to do a presentation in 5th grade on tides. She opened her mouth and closed it again, and for a beat I thought she might say what Sam would want her to say, something about entrepreneurship, about miscommunication, about this is what disruption looks like. She looked at me instead. "I care about our users," she said. Her voice didn't carry. "I care about our team. I care about my mother." The last word fell wrong on those morning mouths outside. It sounded like a foreign currency, but I felt it in my chest like a match catching. "We're done," I said, and gently reached back and closed the door. It clicked into place. The muffled buzz of voices outside shifted, diminished. Ashley leaned into the door like it was the wall of a ship, and she had to feel the hull's strength against her. "What happens now?" she whispered. "You call a lawyer," I said. "A good one who doesn't ski with Sam." My voice was calm in the way tea is warm. "You sleep an hour. You eat something that isn't a supplement. You take a shower until the water runs cold, and then you stop. You show up when you're supposed to. You don't make anything up to make anyone feel better now and worse later." I turned and looked at her because there's a certain point where you stop talking to the shade and speak to the body. "And you tell me everything about those transfers." She flinched. "There were loans," she said, "from your account. Early days. You said it was okay." "I did," I said. "But if my name is on documents because you put it there when I couldn't see the words, that is not okay." I didn't say it like a knife. I said it like a line on the floor that we were both safer on our side of. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, and her mouth twisted around the lie of that. You thought you were building a ship," I said, hearing my own voice like the voice you hear in a dream, knowing and unknown. "You forgot the lifeboats." She stared at me as if I'd put a ladder in front of her and told her to climb. So I did what I have always done. I gave her the first rung. I sat her at the kitchen table and put a plate in front of her. Toast because you can eat it even when your stomach is a fist. An egg because it's something whole that you can break and then fix. I poured coffee and added the cream the way she used to drink it before she started being better. Rosa moved quietly, grateful to be given a task that wasn't hiding. The house breathed like a thing finally allowed. I thought of when Ashley was in 10th grade and fell off the balance beam during practice, the way the gym had gone quiet, chalk dust turning the air into a slow snow. She had sat up and looked around at the girls who were watching, at the coach whose arms were crossed tight around his chest, at me in the stands squeezing the strap of my purse. She had nodded to herself and stood, climbed back up, and done the routine again. She didn't stick the landing. Not perfectly, not like the movies, but she did it. Later she cried the kind of cry that makes the shoulders jump, face pressed into my lap. I was so embarrassed. I had stroked her hair and woven a braid the way my mother did for me, slow and firm. "You went back up," I told her. "That's what we do." By the time the sky began to shift from night to morning, a lighter gray pooling at the edges of the trees, the doorbell had stopped. The SUVs were gone, or at least quiet. My phone buzzed and Frank's name lit the screen. He had done what he could do. He told me that nothing is true until someone puts it on paper under oath. He told me that if anyone comes with a warrant, we should call the number he gave me and then open the door with our backs straight. "You're not in trouble for being a mother," he said. "You don't have to pay for other people's bad arithmetic." Ashley ate the toast in small bites, like a person learning how to do it again. She looked like she wanted to put her head on the table. Instead, she reached for my hand, and I let her take it because I am not a saint. But I am her mother. "I don't know how to be in this house with you," she admitted softly. "I made it not you on purpose. I thought," she closed her eyes, "I thought if it didn't look like where we came from, I would never go back there. I thought if you weren't here, I would be more." She flushed. It was a brave color. "I came here with you once," I said. "When you signed. We did that together. Then I went back to my place and made enchiladas and left half in your fridge. There was no accusation in it, just a trail of breadcrumbs I was laying down for us to follow back. We are not our wallpaper." She laughed, a tired sound that had the shape of a laugh rather than the juice of one. "You sound like a therapist." "I sound like a woman who's woken up at every hour God makes," I said. "Who has stood in hallways waiting for doors to open and not panicked when they didn't. Who has written checks and wiped tears and returned bras because they were $30 too much. Who has sat at games and clapped for the other girl when her daughter's team lost because it was the right thing to do. I sound like me." Ashley squeezed my fingers so hard it hurt. It felt good to hurt a little. It reminded me I wasn't a ghost in this house. "Mom." She looked at the envelope on the counter, at her phone, at the white expanse of her kitchen that had been a stage and a mirror and a cage. "I think I need to tell them about Sam. That's between you and your lawyer," I said, "because love is not advice, and advice is not love. But you need to tell me if there's anything with my name on it that shouldn't be." "There is." The words fell like an anvil, like a relief. "I put you as an officer on paper for 2 quarters at the beginning, because the bank, I thought it would make the account open faster. You never did anything. You just signed. I'm sorry." She said the last part as if it were a language she didn't speak well and had learned phonetically. I sat very still while inside me things rearranged themselves. Not because I hadn't suspected, but because suspicion is a flexible thing, like warm wax. This was the stamp. "Okay," I said. The old me would have followed that with, "We'll figure it out," and meant it like a bandage and like a binding. The new me let the word sit alone. "You will tell the lawyer. You will tell them I didn't know. Because I didn't. Not the way the law asks if you knew. I will," she said. She swallowed, her throat working. "I'll say your name like it deserves to be said. It's not redemption. It's not a movie. It's a kitchen at 5 a.m. with the birds starting to try out their voices in the trees, with the sprinkler system doing its job, with people outside who will be back when the sun is high, because the sun helps their pictures. It's a daughter who has used your generosity like a credit card and is finally reading the balance. It's a mother who is learning that helping is not the opposite of saying no. 4 days ago, at this door, I was told, "This isn't your home anymore." This morning, with sleep still heavy in the corners of our eyes, I put my hand flat on the white of the island and felt it cool and impartial under my palm. And I knew that whether or not this house would ever be mine, I was not homeless. I had lived too long a life to be turned out of it by a smart lock and a bank account. Ashley dozed for an hour on the sofa, her body curled in a shape I knew from 1,000 Sunday movies, and I sat nearby with my hands around a mug. When she stirred, I was on the phone setting an appointment with a woman named Carla, who answers her phone like a person who expects good news and bad news to cost the same. I texted Rosa's niece to check on the soccer game. I looked out at the gate where the world seems to stop and start, like it needs a password, and felt no fear. Just the steady hum of a person who has been many things and will be more. At 2:17 a.m., when I drove through that gate, something changed again. Not the way steel burns and becomes liquid, but the way a muscle breaks and repairs stronger. You can call it whatever you want. I'm calling it waking up. I had spent years making room. For other cars, for investors at long tables, for my daughter's dreams and panic and glory. That night, I made room for myself, which is not moving someone else's things. It's pulling a chair out and sitting in it. It's putting your hand on a door and choosing exactly how it opens. It's a mother and a daughter breathing the same air and deciding to use their voices. The bigger fight was coming. I could feel it in the way the light changed, but I had been practicing for it a long time without knowing, at kitchen tables and school offices and pharmacy counters. The door was shut for now. The house was quiet. We were awake. The first pink edge of morning was still folding itself into the oaks when I dialed the number Carla had texted me. She answered on the second ring with a voice that sounded like a freshly sharpened pencil. Efficient, not unkind. I told her the bare bones. The men at the gate. The envelope with the heavy letterhead. The officer word that had come out of my daughter's mouth like a pebble she'd finally let fall after carrying it under her tongue too long. The loans. The late nights. The new paint still off-gassing like the house didn't want to keep our secrets. First things first, Carla said. No one deletes anything. Pass me the firm on that envelope so I can read what they think they have. We will respond through counsel. And Margaret? Yes, I said, sitting at the end of that beautiful island, the veins in the marble like frozen rivers under my palm. You are not going to be anybody's scapegoat, she said. Not as a mother. Not as a woman. Not as a person who kept receipts. The word receipts slid through me like a blessing and a dare. I looked at the Whole Foods bag on the floor where the security guard had left it 4 days earlier. The edges softened by the way the paper wanted to become earth again. Inside were my amber bottles, my cracked reading glasses in their floral case, my coin purse with the $50 bill folded into a tight square, just in case. Because my father taught me that habit when a gallon of gas cost less than a cup of coffee. Underneath, under the strawberry-patterned handkerchief from my sister, under the napkin from Neil's coffee shop with a doodle of a star Ashley made when she was 12, was an old blue accordion folder. It wasn't beautiful, but it was stubborn. The elastic band had given up years ago. I had fastened it with a rubber band from a bunch of asparagus. I slid it onto the counter and pulled at the band. The tabs thumped out in their little fan. Rent, tuition, Costco, ballet, car, loans, A. The green painter's tape I'd used to label that last section was lifting at the corner like a cuticle. I pressed it down with my thumb. The folder smelled like paper and lemon oil from the desk drawers, and something older, a little like dust after rain. When Ashley was small, we kept everything in a shoebox, stubs from the zoo, the corner of the first ribbon she won at the elementary school field day. Recipe cards with marinara splattered on them like confetti. Somewhere along the way, the shoebox had become a drawer. The drawer had become a folder. After she launched the company, the folder grew fat. I couldn't tell you what made me keep it, except that my mother kept the warranties for appliances she never owned just in case, and that habit runs in our blood like brown eyes. I have some things, I said to Carla, easing the folder open like it might startle. Good, she replied. We're going to use them. Ashley had fallen asleep on the couch, her back to me, her hair moving a little with her breath. She looked like she had when she used to nap on my bed on Saturday afternoons, the TV murmuring a cooking show no one was really watching, a bowl of apples glowing on the dresser in that late sun that makes everything feel honest. Rosa had draped a throw over her. Rosa was at the sink rinsing a cup without letting the water run too loud. When I caught her eye, She gave me that small nod women give each other in kitchens at 5 a.m, in houses that are both theirs and not. I left Ashley sleeping and took the envelope into the front room, where the light from the driveway softened to a kind of watercolor. The letter was written in the kind of English that pretends it is not a language at all, so precise you might miss the point. Allegations, material misstatements, fiduciary duty. The words nested inside each other like those Russian dolls you pull apart until you find a solid core that is a ball, a thing with no more room inside. I took out my cracked glasses and cleaned them on the hem of my shirt. When I slid them on, the world snapped into place in the way it does when you don't realize how soft your edges have gotten. I took notes the way Sister Agnes taught me to in 10th grade when she told us that writing is a form of listening. Then I did the thing that would set the rest in motion. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. It was a small act so ordinary it could have been invisible. I put the envelope aside. I pulled the loans, a tab forward. I looked through the stack of checks and Zelle confirmations and Venmo screenshots with little notes like for payroll and for servers, cash only, and bridge until Friday. I touched the check copies where my own name curved, the loop of the G in Margaret like a lock of hair. Next to the receipts, tucked into the folds of the folder the way your fingers find the warm coin of a smooth stone when you need it, was a matchbook from the Oasis Diner on El Camino. The front showed a drawing of a palm tree that looked a little like a carrot wearing a hat. It was the matchbook we had used under the wobbling desk leg years ago. I don't know why I had kept it. Maybe because we are all constantly making things stand on surfaces that don't care whether we wobble. I slid the matchbook into my jacket pocket and felt for it like a talisman. It was my object, my decision. The desk didn't stop wobbling because I stared at it until it learned manners. It stopped because I got on the floor and did something that looked ridiculous and worked. I could do that again. By 7, the light had fully come. The cars outside had retreated to the shade of the hedge, but I could feel them the way you can feel someone watching even when your eyes are closed. Ashley turned in her sleep and made a small sound. The day was waiting. I drove my Corolla south, past the men in vests walking small, expensive dogs, past the man on the corner with a cardboard sign who always says, "Bless you," whether you give him anything or not, and means it. The eucalyptus trees along El Camino leaned their fragrance into my open window, and for a second, I wanted to keep driving until the road ended at the ocean, and we could all be fishermen again with nothing but the sky to answer to. But I had an errand. The public storage on Woodside Road looks the way all of them do. Orange doors, clean cement, a man at the front desk who acts like he could be persuaded to care if you tell him something funny. I signed in, rode the elevator with a woman holding a lamp with the shade covered in a trash bag, nodded at her like we knew we were both carrying our own version of light wrapped in plastic. I unlocked my unit and pulled down the door. The smell of cardboard and old sweaters and the faint sweetness of cedar blocks hit me. I found the box labeled "Office" in my own careful printing. Inside were 2 more folders and a spiral-bound notebook with a sticker of a Girl Scout trefoil on the front. The notebook had been my command center during the early years of Ashley's company. The page flags still stuck out at intervals like little tongues. On one page, in my own hand, I found a list titled January, Bridge. Under it, a tidy column. Visa payment. Rent, office. 2 engineers, paid in cash. Postmates, catering. Uber to SF pitch, mom, transfer. There were dates and amounts and little check marks. Next to that, in Ashley's handwriting, larger, looser, the letters bumping into each other, was a note. "You're the best. I'll make this right X 1000. I traced that line with my finger until it felt carved. Before I left, I reached into a smaller box labeled Ashley Room and found the chipped green frog that had sat on the desk. It was the kind of thing you would throw away if you were making room for more adult objects. I wrapped it in an old dish towel and put it in my bag. I couldn't explain why it felt important, only that it did. Some things you keep because they remember you back. On my way out, I stopped at a 7-Eleven and poured coffee into a paper cup that said, "Have a nice day," in a font that looked like it was trying too hard. I bought a banana that was too green and paid in cash, because sometimes you need to feel the exchange, money for sustenance, hand to hand, the way markets used to feel. The cashier said, Take care now. And I believed he meant it. Carla called while I was sitting in my car in the parking lot with the banana on my knee and the accordion folder open on the passenger seat. I've reached counsel for the other side, she said. They are going to push for a narrative that places as much of the irregularity as possible in the category of household confusion. Do not, I repeat, do not offer them your confusion. I won't, I said, watching a man in a giant's cap buy a bundle of firewood in a plastic net, like he would carry it into a living room where people still talked face to face. Also, Carla added, I've drafted a brief statement for you. You can deliver it if you feel you need to make a public comment, or we can release it. Up to you. But understand that once you say anything outside, you can't undo it. I thought of the girl at the door, with her phone held like a newborn. I thought of Sam's eyes sliding over the house inventory to find things he had already decided he owned. I thought of Ashley sleeping inside a house that had rooms so empty of memory you could echo in them. I think I do need to say something, I said. On my terms. Then keep it simple, she advised. Do not apologize for things you did not do. Do not attack. State facts. State what you are doing next. And Margaret? Yes, I said. Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself, she said. It matters. Maybe she had a mother once who wore a blue cardigan to a fight she didn't choose. I went back to the house. Rosa let me in with the kind of relief that replaces adrenaline when you have been in a movie and the credits finally roll even if the story isn't over. Ashley was awake, sitting on the floor in the living room with her knees pulled up, looking like someone who had been taken out of a glossy magazine and put back into a real life. She had a draft in her hand. It was from a PR firm. You could tell by the way it used the phrase, "we are committed to," as if commitment were a bridge and not a place you stand. It says we regret any confusion, she said. It says some processes weren't as formal as they could have been during high-growth phases. It says... She stopped. She looked up at me with that old, thin hope. It says, I'm a visionary. I sat on the sofa because I didn't want to look down at her when I said what I had to say. Do you regret any confusion? I asked. She blinked. I regret not having someone in here who could handle the numbers in a way that would have avoided this, she said, a field of words carefully fenced to keep the actual animal from running into traffic. You had someone in here, I said quietly. You had me. And when I asked questions, I was told I didn't need to worry my head about it. I let the edge of that side out. I am done worrying my head about things in silence. She stared at the paper. Sam said if I apologize to anyone, it opens the door to liabilities that we can't close. Sam says a lot of things, I replied, feeling the matchbook in my pocket. Here is what I say. If you want my help, this is what it costs. I will not lie. I will not sign anything I cannot read with my glasses on in quiet daylight. I will not be named anything I have not agreed to be. You will not speak about me in the third person when I'm in the room. You will retain Carla and you will allow me to hire her for myself as well. And you will stand next to me while I make a statement at your gate, not to defend you, but to put my own name in my own mouth. If you want my help after that, we will see. It was the moment. The little click I had been waiting for in myself, the sound of a latch finding its home. The basta wasn't a shout. It was the sound of me fitting into the person I had been edging toward for longer than I knew. The injustices had piled quietly. The introduction as advisor, when mother, would have sufficed. The check written with my mortgage pinching it on the other side. The loan called a gift. The plaque promised and never hung. The day the code changed on the gate. The security guard carrying my bag like a rag. The PR firm handing me a statement that turned my life into filler text. Each thing by itself is survivable. Together they form a ladder only if you decide to climb it. Ashley held my gaze like it was a rope. There is a look that passes between a child and a mother, when you are not whatever roles you have memorized. You are simply two human beings in need of a bridge. Okay, she said. The word was small, but it didn't break. I went upstairs to wash my face because I didn't want to present myself to the world with last night's salt on me. In the guest bathroom, no one had used it for anything but product trials. I could tell by the array of bottles and the way the towels were folded like hotel birds. I stood in front of the mirror and pinned my old Girl Scout trefoil pin to the collar of my denim jacket. It had been in the pocket of the accordion folder under an old pack list for a camping trip to Memorial Park. I put it on not because I wanted to be a girl again, but because I needed to carry proof of someone who learned in a backyard what it means to stand in a circle and promise to be honest, helpful, brave. I tucked the matchbook deeper into my pocket. I slid the frog into my bag so he could sit beside the receipts. I looked at my face in the mirror and said out loud, "We always make room." And then I added, "Me too." By 9, the cars had returned. Fewer than before, but the right ones. Not the night animals that come sniffing at crisis, but the morning kind who know that people are up and can be asked to say things under the sun. A woman from the Mercury News was there, her hair pulled back, a pencil tucked behind her ear and a nod to the ancestors of her profession. A young man with a camera for a local station, maybe KPIX, maybe KQED with their gentle way, stood near the agapanthus. The man from last night with the envelope was gone. Sam had returned, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, a Patagonia vest zipped like a good deed. I opened the door and stepped onto the slate. The heat that comes off that kind of stone in the morning is different than neighborhood heat. It's a statement of wealth set into the earth, a thing that says, even when you are not here, things of yours are warmed. I felt stable on it in a way that surprised me. Ashley stood just inside. I didn't look back to check if she had stayed. I could feel her anyway. "Good morning," I said. There were fewer clicks this time, more ears. "I'm Margaret Collins. I am Ashley's mother. I am not an officer of her company. I was named an officer on paper without my informed consent for a brief period years ago. I did not perform officer duties. I have never misrepresented any financial matter to anyone at any time. I provided personal loans to my daughter that are documented. I have those records." I lifted the folder and for a second felt foolish bringing a blue accordion file to a glass gunfight. Then I didn't. I opened it and took out a copy of a check and held it up the way you hold a well-made pie. January 3rd, 2018. $15,000. Note, payroll. The bank cashed. They can speak to it. A hand went up like we were in school. It was the Mercury News reporter. "Ms. Collins, do you believe your daughter knowingly inflated numbers to secure funding?" "I'm not going to speak to her intent," I said, because Carla's voice was in my ear reminding me that dropping kitchen gossip on the courthouse steps is how you end up eating it yourself. "I am going to speak to what I know. When I couldn't sleep, I did not count sheep. I counted lines in a ledger. I am not a visionary. I am a person who remembers where the money went. It went to Postmates and to the water bill, and to the little bowl of cash for the engineer who didn't have a bank account yet because he had just moved here from Brazil and was afraid. It went to gas in my car when I drove my daughter to the new office. It went to servers' tips at restaurants where men in vests told my daughter she was a force. It went to the rug cleaners when coffee spilled on the sample living room they built in an office with no walls to make it feel like a home. A murmur. Polite. The kind that says someone has said something that landed, not because it was clever, but because it was true. "Ms. Collins," another voice said, "why are you speaking now? 4 days ago, your daughter asked you to leave this residence." "Because I was asked to tell a story," I said, and kept my voice level. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do with anger is not to let it melt your consonants. I was asked to say that I handled certain transfers alone, that I confused things out of love, and I will not do that. My daughter is a woman I love. She is also a grown person who made choices. I will help her do the right thing. I will not help her do the wrong thing faster. Sam stepped forward a little, placing himself in my peripheral vision. "Margaret," he said, voice as smooth as a promise. "We're all on the same side here." I turned my head just enough to make eye contact. "The side of the table you sit on is not the same thing as a side," I replied. "And I am not a table." There was a ripple of restrained laughter that had more fatigue in it than joy. I felt the matchbook in my pocket. It was such a small thing, cardboard with a little row of red heads waiting to become light. It had held up a desk. It could hold up my spine. "I will be delivering these records to counsel," I said, nodding to the folder. "I will also be filing a declaration with the court if necessary. I am willing to speak to appropriate authorities, including anyone from the state who needs to understand the truth of how money moved in ways that matter. I will not be discussing my daughter's private life, which includes her relationships and her perfume and her shoes and other things you will ask me about because they sell better. I will not take questions about whether I am hurt. I am 65 years old. I have been hurt. I am still here. That is not a story. That is a fact. I paused. Also, please do not frighten our housekeeper. She is not part of this, except that she knows which coffee cup I like, because women know those things about each other, and that is not a headline. At that moment, inside behind me, there was a small sound. I didn't turn, but I knew what it was. Ashley had put her palm on the other side of the glass, the way she used to put it on the aquarium at Curiosity and wait for a fish to come by and think she could touch it. The cameras, to their credit, did not turn. The Mercury newswoman looked at the door and then looked back at me. We both pretended we had not noticed what we'd noticed. "Will you be staying here?" someone asked. "For now, I will be going to my motel," I said. "I like having my own place to put my shoes by the door. It helps me know I am not in anyone's way. But I will be back, because this is my daughter's life. And being in someone's life doesn't always mean being in their house." The young cameraman lowered his camera a little. His face did something like the first time a boy looks at a woman his mother's age and sees not a category but a person. I handed a copy of my brief statement to the Mercury newswoman, and another to a man with a notebook, whose byline I'd seen under pieces about school board meetings and potholes and other things that keep towns from burning down. I gave nothing to Sam. He had enough. When it was done, when the words had been released into the air where they could not be collected back into a cupboard, I stepped back into the foyer and closed the door. My hands were not shaking. I stood there for a second with my forehead resting against the cool glass. Through it, the agapanthus looked like cups. I had always liked that about them, their willingness to hold sky. Ashley was standing with her arms wrapped around herself like a person who has just come out of cold water. Her cheeks were blotched. She didn't speak. She simply leaned forward and put her head on my shoulder. I let her, not because she had earned it, but because that is not how love works. "I thought you were going to burn me down out there," she murmured into my jacket. "I'm not a match," I said. "I have one, though, if we need to light a candle so we can see better." She laughed then, a short, surprised sound that made her sound like the little girl who used to hide behind me when Mrs. Kwan's cat came out to say hello, and she wasn't sure if hello meant hello. "I hate Sam," she said, immediately covering her mouth like she had said a rude thing in church. "You hate what Sam made you think you had to be," I corrected gently. "You can find your way back, but you have to do it. I can't carry you over the fence." There was more that day. There always is. There were calls from men who spoke with the kind of kindness that means you should loop your wallet. There were emails with words in bold and italics. There was a text from a woman who runs a nonprofit in San Mateo, where I had once organized a coat drive. "If you need a place to sleep that isn't a motel, come here." There was a missed call from my sister in Chico, who leaves voicemails like homemade bread. Dense, nourishing, imperfect. There was a message from Linda Peterson with 3 heart emojis and the sentence, "You did good, Em." There was also a ping from a private number that turned out to be an investigator with the state. I gave his name to Carla. We set an appointment. I would tell him what I knew in a small room with a recorder on the table, and the same honesty I had brought to Little League concession stands and fundraisers, and nights when the water heater went out and we made tea in the microwave. In the middle of the afternoon, when the cameras went to other stories because car chases and ribbon cuttings wait for no one, I drove to my storage unit again and brought back a box labeled Kitchen Old House. It had the cast iron skillet my mother had given me, the one that had seared chicken every Sunday for years, until we did the thing people with new money do, and bought a nonstick pan that lasted 6 months and taught us nothing. I washed the skillet in Ashley's sink and dried it on her stove. I made us grilled cheese the way I always had, with a lid on the pan to melt faster, and the heat low enough so the bread goes brown like toast. I cut the sandwiches corner to corner, not because it mattered, but because I learned when Ashley was 5 that triangles are easier to eat when the world is big. I put a handful of grapes on each plate and 2 pickles because it felt like a luxury. Ashley ate hers with the intensity you get when you have been living on air and espresso and the idea of future meals. She looked at my hands. "I forgot how you do that thing where you stack 2 slices and then cut," she said. "It's like watching a magic trick." "It's not magic," I said. But she shook her head like she disagreed, and that made me feel something that wasn't triumph, just recognition. When the sun edged down, turning the trees into spiky silhouettes against a sky with a great cheese on it, I went out to the rosemary bush way back. It was new, planted by someone with better knees than me, but rosemary is rosemary. I pinched a sprig off and rolled it between my fingers until the oil slicked my fingertips. I put the sprig in my jacket pocket next to the matchbook. You keep some things near your heart because they remind it what its job is when other parts of you are busy. Sam came back, of course, because men like Sam do not invent doors they cannot open. He came with a woman from a PR firm named something like a furniture store. He asked to speak to Ashley alone. Ashley looked at me. "Do you want me to step out?" I asked. She took a breath. "No," she said. "Stay." He started with the word optics. He used words like trajectory and narrative arc. He said founder journeys and humanizing this and controlling the cycle. He looked at me twice, once with impatience and once with calculation. "My mother already spoke," Ashley said, her voice quiet and new. "And I'm going to speak to the state, with my lawyer. We are not going to call it confusion." Sam smiled a smile that men learn in rooms with no clocks. "We don't want to do anything we can't unring," he said. "Let's keep our options open." "I'd rather close the bad ones," I said, and stood up. "You've had a lot of words in this house, Sam. It's time for some silence that isn't the kind where you wait for a better lie." Ashley didn't look at him while he left. She looked at me. It is hard to reorient. If you have spun in circles too long, stopping can feel like falling. That's what she looked like, a person bracing for gravity. I put my hand on the island and felt the cool under my palm. It steadied me again. She put her hand next to mine, almost touching. It was enough. I drove back to my motel at dusk. El Camino Real glowed with brake lights and neon. A boy on a skateboard sailed across a crosswalk in front of me, hair haloed by street lamp. A couple argued quietly outside a PHO place and then laughed, the way people do when love overrides the problem because the soup is hot and the day is long. The motel room smelled like the same bleach. The AC rattled. I put the accordion folder on the table and the frog on the TV stand where he looked out over a landscape of laminate and curtain. I called my sister and told her I was okay. I wasn't, and I was. Both can be true. I took a shower and stood under the water only until it ran cold. Then I stopped, because that is a kind of discipline that serves you later. Before I slept, I wrote a list, because that is what I do when there are storms. It had boxes to check. Call investigator, confirm time. Scan checks 2017-2019. Find officer doc. Ask Carla about declaratory relief. Return Rose's Tupperware. I added one line at the bottom. Buy Ashley socks. I know. It's absurd. It made me cry for exactly 4 seconds, and then it made me laugh. The truth is in the small things as much as in the big ones. That night, sleep came like a dog that needs to be coaxed with the last piece of chicken. It resisted. It circled. It finally lay down. I dreamed of the desk. In the dream, I turned it over and over, looking for the wobble, but it stood steady on its own. When I woke up at 2:17 a.m. again, out of habit, the room was quiet. No buzzing. Just me. I put my hand in my jacket pocket and felt the matchbook. I lay there a minute listening to the night traffic outside, trucks moving like ideas through the dark, and felt a calm that didn't depend on any other person's approval. The next day was busier. There were calls with Carla that felt like laying bricks, a solid thing being built one piece at a time, mortared with patience. There was a trip to the UPS store to scan pages where the man behind the counter wore a bow tie and said, "Take your time," the way some people might say, "grace." There was a stop at Neil's for a bowl of oatmeal because my body needed steady release, not spikes. The waitress called me honey without irony and topped off my coffee until my cup was a small lake of comfort. In the afternoon, I went to Redwood City and stood in line to file a form with a woman behind glass who had a sunflower on her mug and a stamp that made a satisfying clack. When I slid the form under, she looked at the name and the case number and then at me. She didn't comment. She stamped. She slid it back. I thanked her like she had found my lost ring. Administration is not glamorous. It's how we keep from dissolving. When I went back to the Atherton house at sunset, Ashley met me at the door with bare feet and a look I hadn't seen in years. Something open. Something not arranged. I told them, she said. I told the investigator everything. I told him I put you on paper without asking. I told him I inflated growth by counting people who had deleted the app as inactive users because Sam said it was just a matter of classification. I told him about the emails where Sam said investors want a number that sounds like a drum beat, not a heartbeat. I told him I wanted the drum. I'm not going to run. I let the relief wash over me without letting it drag me under. Relief is dangerous if you ride it like a wave. You have to stand in it. Good, I said. Now we go forward. Now we take the consequences that are ours and leave the ones that aren't in the hands they belong to. She looked at the frog on the side table where I had put him earlier. You brought him, she said. He wanted to see the world again, I said. He thought maybe he could make this place feel like a place where homework can happen. She picked him up and held him like a thing you pass down to your child's child. I'm going to go get my desk, she announced, and I laughed because I could picture her marching into the past demanding furniture. You can buy 10 desks, I reminded her. I want the one we leveled, she said. I'm done with furniture that doesn't need anybody. That night, we ate enchiladas in the kitchen I had once left half a pan in, the sauce splashing onto the plates with the easy hospitality of food, cooked in a pan older than most of the people in the house. We ate by the slider with the door cracked, so we could hear the sprinklers in the neighbor's yard, and the distant sound of a Caltrain whistle marking the hour. When the dishes were done, Ashley stood at the sink and looked out at the rosemary, her hands still under the water like she had forgotten to turn it off. Mom, she said, her voice barely above the faucet. Why didn't you yell at me when I asked you to leave? Why did you pick up the phone when I called? I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. The truth is not complicated. Because I would rather be your mother than be right, I said. But I am willing to be both. She took that in the way you take in medicine. Suspicious, grateful, unsure of how bitter it will be. She turned off the water. We stood there listening to the house breathe. If you had told me a year ago that the most dramatic thing I would do at 65 would be to hold up a check to a row of cameras and say nothing anyone could twist, I would have thought you didn't know me. I imagined my later years quieter than this. Bingo and book clubs and Costco runs where the cashier calls me by name, and the manager in the tie waves because I returned a cart once in the rain. But drama is not always screaming. Sometimes it's the quiet sound of a woman putting her own name back in her mouth and finding it fits. Days later, the story had moved to other hands. There were headlines. There were think pieces with pictures of women in blazers staring out of windows. There were tweets, if that's what we still call them. My name was in some of them. The comments were kinder than I expected, crueler than I deserved, exactly what they always are, about the commenter. What mattered was this. When the state sent a second set of questions, they were addressed to Ashley and to Sam, not to me. What mattered was this. The code on the gate changed again, and someone sent me the new one with the message for you. What mattered was this. In the San Mateo living room of a duplex that used to be mine, and might be again next year if we do this right, I found the desk, green paint chipped at the corner, frog ready to sit watch. I slid the matchbook under the leg again, for old time's sake. It wasn't necessary. It stood. On a Monday, I stood in line at the post office on Baldwin and chatted with a woman in a visor about tomatoes. On a Wednesday, I took Rosa's niece to practice because Rosa had to take her mother to the clinic. On a Friday, I sat across from Ashley and Carla as we went through a list a page long, checking boxes, filling gaps, building a bridge to somewhere that wasn't a cliff. You're good at this, Carla said to me after, almost offhand, the way people hand you compliments they don't know how to wrap. You could do it for money. I've been doing it for years, I said. I just didn't invoice. We both laughed in that tired, grateful way. The night before the first court date, Ashley asked if I would come to the house early. I brought bagels and sliced tomatoes and the onions that make you cry, but are necessary if you want the flavor to cut the cream cheese. We ate by the island, and she put her phone face down. "Mom," she said, and then stopped like the word was a cliff. "If I have to, if there are consequences, will you be there? Even if it's not pretty?" "Yes," I said. Even then. But Ashley, she looked up like there was a hawk overhead. "Not at the expense of myself. Not again," I finished. "I will not sell my house. I will not sign away my name. I will not move in to be thrown out. If you need me, you will make room that doesn't require me to disappear." She nodded. It was like we were signing a contract we could keep. Sometimes the climax doesn't come with music. It comes with a pen scratch. It comes with a key turning in a lock that had been stuck. It comes with an older woman with rosemary in her pocket, and a little green frog on the counter and a matchbook in her coat, standing in a kitchen that had tried to be a showroom, and remembering that kitchens are where people come to tell the truth or to make sandwiches to take into the rest of the world. The morning of court, we walked up the steps of the Redwood City Courthouse together. Ashley's shoes clicked, but not in the way they had that night on the marble when panic chased her breath. These were steadier. On the landing, she reached for my hand. I took it. Her grip was firm. The sky was the kind of blue you get after rain. People passed us in suits and in jeans. Everyone had their own story, their own receipts, their own matchbooks tucked away. I felt as ready as a person can feel. When we went through the doors, the guard at the checkpoint asked us to put our things on the belt. I put my purse, my folder, my keys. The matchbook, forgotten in my pocket, passed through the scanner. The guard handed it back to me. "Ma'am," he said, polite, "you can't light that in here." "I won't," I said. "Not today." I slid it into the pocket of my jacket, where it lay like a little square of future. Then we went in. We went in. The metal detector did its little bleeping ceremony, and the clerk asked us the same perfunctory questions everyone answers when they walk into one of those rooms that feels like it was built to swallow secrets. The courtroom smelled of lemon oil and old paper and polished wood, the kind of smells that make you think the place has been practicing gravity for a long time. My folder sat heavy on my lap like a bookmarked life. Ashley's hand found mine under the bench and squeezed with a pressure that said she needed a rope, and I was it. The hearing itself was not a movie. There were no dramatic speeches, no gavel pounding like thunder. There was, instead, a sequence of small official things that, strung together, have more power than any single shout. The state investigator introduced himself, clean and tired. He had the kind of patience that comes from asking the same question 50 times in 50 different ways, and still expecting an honest answer on the 50th. Ashley answered, first halting, then more certain. She read from emails and documents, her voice sometimes thin at the edges, sometimes steady as a ruler. Sam's counsel asked precise, sharp questions meant to box the story into neat squares. He did not, as far as I know, smile much. I listened to my own declaration being read aloud, my words moving out into the room like coins placed on a table. I was asked to clarify things I had already said on the slate outside the house. Which dates, which amounts, who signed what. I did not dramatize. I clarified. I refused to be put into the role of a weeping chorus. I refused finally to be small. When I spoke of the checks, January 3rd, 2018, March 15th, 2019, a Zelle transfer on a Tuesday that had gone to an engineer who later built half a city's back-end architecture, I felt a lightness in naming particulars. Names are like weights sometimes. Say them loud enough and they stop floating around your head. They land. The investigator took notes. He asked if I would come to the office and sit with him in the recorder, which I did. I told the truth as plainly as I knew it. The loans, the dates, the reasons written on napkins and matchbooks and sticky notes. He made no promises about outcomes. That is not part of his job. He promised only that he would record what I said. Outside the courthouse that first day, the photographers clustered like birds and shuffled their feet with polite, practiced hunger. Someone asked me if I regretted what I had done. I thought of the night I told Ashley to make room, and how I had taken that habit too far. I don't regret loving my daughter, I said. I regret when love is used to do accounting for other people's choices. It was not a tidy sentence, and neither of us wanted tidy. People nodded in the way that people do, when they understand the shape of a thing, but not the weight of the thing. In the weeks that followed, the immediate consequences sorted themselves into the categories the state likes: inquiries, subpoenas, board meetings, resigned positions. Sam, who always liked to be the story's center, became a peripheral one. The board demanded explanations. The investors wanted quiet and stability, and their emails started landing like polite demands. Sam resigned from his operational role. He did not, to my knowledge, get to keep everything. That is not to say there weren't lawyers writing letters with the kind of grand velvet language that says you have options, but not necessarily happiness. There were. There always are. But the rhythm had changed. Instead of one person making decisions in rooms that smelled expensive, there were now committees, audits, and a serious person from Palo Alto who knew how to read lines on spreadsheets and did not flinch when confronted with an inactive users column. Ashley, for her part, did something that felt both brave and dull. She did the work. She met with Carla and with lawyers who had been my age once and had learned how to put feeling into a ledger. She cooperated with the investigators. She drafted public statements that did not try to make herself into a hero. She apologized in a way that did not seek forgiveness as a commodity to be traded. It was more like handing over a tool and saying, "I broke it. I will help fix it." The company implemented new controls. They brought in an independent auditor. They set up a restitution fund for engineers and contractors who had been paid informally. Not everything was fixed overnight. Honesty doesn't work like a patch you download. But the bones of the structure shifted in a way that made it harder for a single person to pretend that clarity is optional. People said things in public that stung. They said I had been naive, that I should have read my paperwork. They said I had enabled, that my kindness was dangerous. Some of those things were true. Some were said because truth likes to wear a dozen hats. I filed responses and declarations with assistants. I met with the state investigator twice more, and once with a woman from the investor committee who cried when she talked about a developer they had lost because of accounting confusion. She wiped her eyes with a hand that had polished many checks and said, "We trusted the narrative," to which I could only think, and sometimes say, trust is a two-way street paved by receipts. There were smaller consequences that no one filed in formal reports, but that rearranged our house. Sam's voice stopped threading through the door in the same way. The PR firm I'd seen drinking expensive coffee at that marble counter got replaced by a team that preferred to do its work without an appetite for drama. Some investors left, others stayed. The app reclassified users in a way that made numbers less romantic and more useful. Ashley stepped back from her role as the sole face of everything. She stayed but built a team with real accountants and real controls. She slept. More. She cried sometimes. She called me and said, "I'm tired," as if the phrase held everything that grief, panic, and shame had tried to name. And then there was us. The immediate consequence of the public truth was a kind of domestic calm. It was not a white flag. It was a decision to stop using each other as shields. We began, clumsily, to reconstruct a relationship that had been chewed by acceleration and polished by success. She came to my motel sometimes, though she hated the fluorescent light over the sink. I went to her house and sat on the island, and we ate the grilled cheeses I made in the old cast-iron skillet until the edges browned and the cheese pulled like good, honest threads. We laughed about small things, how she once tried to iron a shirt with the iron set on the wood table, and how her fingers had stopped burning because she had taught herself to be careful by being reckless first. We set boundaries. They were the scaffolding of trust. I would not sign anything without time to read it. I would not be spoken of in third person. I would not be asked to confuse the truth to protect a balance sheet. In return, Ashley promised transparency, and to be present in the hard parts she had been trying to bolt over with gloss. Those were the terms. Both of us understood that this was not forgiveness in a romantic sense. but a contract of care. There were modest victories. A few engineers had their payments regularized. A vendor got a formal apology and a check. The state's inquiry, stern and procedural, concluded with demands for better internal controls and a fine that the company paid. It was not the apocalypse. It was, in legal terms, a corrective. In human terms, it was a weighing and a counting and a calling to account, and then the slow, awkward business of trying to make the ledger more honest than it had been. Through it all, the matchbook became a ridiculous little talisman. Every time I reached for it, when I sat on the porch at my motel and felt the night like something that might decide how my bones would be remembered, when I drove the green desk back to our living room and set it under the window where Ashley had once done homework, it sat in my pocket like a small, stubborn defiance. The matchbook never did anything heroic. It did what it was built to do: hold a tiny promise of light in the pocket of a jacket. Once, in a rare moment of vanity about ritual, Ashley and I lit a single candle on the kitchen table. We didn't do it because candles are dramatic. We did it because we wanted to mark the day as one where we had said true things and heard them answered. The flame was small, and the wax pooled and cooled like honesty sometimes does when it finally settles. We put the matchbook on the counter next to the frog. Green, chipped, a witness. Time is a patient thing. After the initial noise, people get bored of scandal and newspapers go looking for the next shiny thing. That was a relief in its own way. Coverage faded. The state's involvement moved from daily calls to forms filled to a checklist. And in the quieter hours, the things that had always mattered reasserted themselves. Neighborly obligations, PTA meetings, soccer practices, bags of groceries returned because the person in line didn't have enough change. I took Rosa to a clinic appointment because she had a sore shoulder. She brought me a jar of preserved lemons she'd made, and we swapped recipes. I went to Neil's Coffee and sat at the counter and wrote checks and scanned pages and tried to slow the pulse rate of the situation into something I could manage. One afternoon, months after the gate slid closed on that first night, I was in the duplex in San Mateo where I'd once lived, and where, maybe in time, I might live again. The green desk sat in the corner of the living room, finally back where it belonged. It had a new chip on the corner where I had slid a small piece of felt over a scratch so it wouldn't catch on shirts. I set the matchbook beneath the short leg and, out of an old habit, checked for wobble. It stood steady now. I had propped it once with a matchbook for fun. I'd done it again as a ritual. The frog sat on top like a small monarch. Ashley came by that day with a box of files she'd been ordered to keep by counsel. She was thinner, like people are when they've been through something that takes up a lot of space for a while. She sat at the desk and pulled out a page that had my handwriting on it. A grocery list from 15 years ago we'd used as a notepad. On it she'd scrawled, "Mom, call Bankery overdraft." She laughed at the memory of my voice about money. It was a laugh threaded with gratitude. "I'm sorry about what I put you through," she said. And this time the words landed differently. There was no performative flourish, no attempt to make drama out of remorse. It was the clean apology of someone who had worked through the math. "You paid the servers when the payroll was late," I said, because sometimes forgiveness doesn't require a speech. It requires recognition. "You were scared, and I was scared." I looked at her. "We can keep doing the work." Little by little. She nodded. She put her head down for a second, then reached into her bag and drew out a small folded paper. It was an old business card from the Oasis Diner with a note on the back. "For wobbling furniture. Match." She'd written it 5 minutes after we'd fixed the desk when she was 12. Now she slid it back into my hand. "Keep it," she said. "For the desk. For me. For whatever." There were other kinds of rebuilding. I started volunteering again. Not because my name needed to be public, but because the small acts of service helped reset the rhythm of days. I helped organize a coat drive at the nonprofit in San Mateo. We made brown paper bundles of meals and stapled labels to plastic containers. I set up a little corner at the PTA where we could talk about fiscal responsibility in a non-threatening way. People came even when the topic sounded dull. There is hunger for ordinary competence in a world that sells spectacle. The real change, the thing that felt like freedom, was not the court settlements or the reconstituted board. It was the quiet return of my own sense of self. I stopped waking at 2 in the morning with the buzzing panic that had been my constant companion. Sometimes I woke at that hour and would reach for the matchbook and then remember that I was awake and that my hand could hold something small and ordinary, and that was enough. Sometimes I would drive to Neil's for oatmeal, and a woman named Jan would call me Han and mean it. Those were the weights that kept my life from flying apart. There were afternoons when the press would call and I would say no. There were afternoons when I would say yes, and my voice would be measured and mundane and entirely mine. I spoke at a small community panel about how families navigate money, simple things. Always read what you sign. Keep separate accounts if you want separate lives. Ask for counsel. Let love be generous but not blind. People came and listened. Some of them cried during the Q&A. It felt like tending a garden. Ashley and I did something else. We made a ritual of the small, ordinary. Every Sunday we would meet, sometimes at her house, sometimes at my motel, sometimes in the duplex's living room if the month allowed, and cook something silly. One week it was enchiladas again. Another week it was bagels and tomatoes. We would set our phones face down and we would talk about smaller things. Tommy's last soccer match, the new neighbor with the lavender bushes, the price of avocados. The routine, mundane and sustained, built trust by habit. It was not dramatic. It was effective. The matchbook never became a shrine. It simply lived in my jacket pocket like a promise to myself that I would be the person who got on the floor and fixed the wobble when necessary, but would also set a lid over a pan when things needed to be kept from burning. One evening, when the case had quieted to a hum and the company had its own rhythm again, Ashley and I sat on the porch of the duplex and watched the light go soft in the eucalyptus. She reached for my hand and put the small frog on my knee. "Will you keep coming to court?" she asked, a question that was honest in its own way. "I will come," I said, "but I will not be a ghost in the room." I looked at her. "I will be here when you need me. I will be not at the expense of myself." She nodded and tucked her head against my shoulder. We sat there until the moon came up like a coin. "If you want the tidy end, Sam punished, the company destroyed. I don't have it. Life is not tidy. There were consequences, yes, but there was also repair. Investors learned something. Ashley learned something harder. I learned something I should have known in the first place. You can love someone and still refuse to be used as a cushion for their choices. Love that ends up enabling harm is not love. Love that sets limits can still be generous. The desk stands where it always did, green paint chipped, frog vigilant. The matchbook slides about my pocket sometimes, and I take it out to look at the little cartoon palm that looks like a hat-wearing carrot and think of all the ways we prop things up. I think of the lesson that came with wearing the Girl Scout trefoil pin to a press moment and how small institutions teach big things. Be honest, be helpful, be brave. I taught Ashley to drive once under a eucalyptus haze. It turns out you learn to steer at every age if you are courageous enough to look at the road. The last hearing ended with a clerk stamping a file and a woman behind the glass telling me to have a nice day, like she had handed me a small, ordinary benediction. I smiled and meant it. We walked out of the courthouse together, Ashley's step firmer now, and the matchbook in my pocket felt less like a talisman and more like a memoir. Small, mundane, but useful. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from saying your name aloud and making sure it fits where it goes. I discovered it when I held up those checks on the slate driveway and when I said, plainly, "I am Margaret Collins. I loved my daughter enough to write her checks, and I loved myself enough to not be a lie." The peace wasn't loud. It was the sound of a woman sitting down to a plate of grilled cheese and finding the cheese melted all the way through. It was the quiet satisfaction of furniture that stands on its own without needing to be propped. If you've been watching this unfold with the same breath held, I thank you. If you're someone who has loved someone into a problem and are wondering how to step out without stepping away from care, I promise you there is a path that keeps both compassion and integrity. If you want to talk about what you would do in a similar spot, leave a comment. Tell me about the matchbook you keep. Tell me about the desk you propped. If this made you feel anything, brave, angry, relieved, press the like button so someone who needs to hear they're not alone might find this. And if you want to be part of these conversations about family, money, dignity, subscribe. We'll keep talking. We'll keep making room. We'll keep our own names safe. When I fold the matchbook back into my pocket now, it's not to light a flame so much as to remember that the smallest tool can steady a wobble long enough to take a breath and do the right thing. We always make room. We make room for cleaning up the messes we helped make, for rebuilding desks and reputations, and, for me, finally, for my own self in the space between love and truth.